Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Erin Lurie, and we are waiting just a few moments as folks are coming in, and we'll get started shortly. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We're waiting just a few more moments as Zoom is letting all of our attendees in, and we will get started in just a few moments. All right, it looks like for the time being, like everybody's made it in. So at this point, I am going to invite Kate Markert, Hillwood's Executive Director, to come on and start the program.
And Kate, it appears you're muted.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Erin. Sorry, you think we've done this enough times, right? I'm Kate Markert. I'm Executive Director at Hillwood Estate Museum and Gardens in Washington, D.C. We currently have a fabulous exhibition on view in the mansion, The Porcelain Flowers of Vladimir Kanevsky. It is perfectly at home among Hillwood's 18th century treasures. Thank you for inviting us into your home tonight. It's always a pleasure to connect with Hillwood members and friends, whether via Zoom or in our magnificent gardens. The gardens really are truly remarkable at the moment, and I invite those of you who are in the Washington, D.C. area to come and enjoy the exquisite blooms, both outdoors and in. We're open Tuesday through Sunday, 10 to 5. And I want to thank our members for their ongoing support and invite those of you who have not yet joined to do so. You can find a lot more information about membership, our current visitor guidelines and COVID protocols, and make your reservations at hillwoodmuseum.org. While there's always plenty to see at Hillwood, this summer presents a real treasure trove with 3 stunning exhibitions. In addition to the Porcelain Flowers of Vladimir Kanevsky, June brings the opening of 2 exhibitions. Roaring Twenties, The Life and Style of Marjorie Merriweather Post, and Christine May's Rich Soil. And that's a sculpture exhibition that will be installed throughout the gardens. It is the perfect time to come to Hillwood and see them all. We will, of course, continue virtual programming to connect with friends both near and far, but I am thrilled to announce our very careful and cautious return to gathering in person. Later in the summer, we'll make the most of Marjorie Merriweather Post's expansive lunar lawn and use it just like she did. But we will have a physically distanced conversation with Christine Mays. We'll have a celebration of the Japanese Star Festival. And we will have wire art workshops and dance performances. So there's much more information about all of these events on our website. It's now my pleasure to introduce tonight's program. Curator Wilfried Zeisler will share an overview of the Porcelain Flowers of Vladimir Kanevsky before he's joined in conversation with the artist himself. Please make yourself comfortable throughout the program. Your cameras and microphones will remain off, but we do want to hear from you. Please share your questions as they cross your mind in the Q&A, and our moderator, Erin, will be sure we get to them at the end. Vladimir Kanevsky was born in Ukraine and immigrated to the United States in 1989. He is now based in Fort Lee, New Jersey. After beginning his career as an architect, Vladimir first turned to porcelain while working on a tableware project for designer Howard Slatkin. Fascinated by botany, Vladimir swiftly transitioned to creating flowers in this new medium. Among his notable achievements are an 11-piece collaboration with the Meissen porcelain manufactory in 2012, and then in 2017, a major exhibition at the State Hermitage in St. Petersburg, Russia. His major collectors include Deidre Baer, Charlotte Moss, Carolyn Roan, and Albert Pinto, among many others. But before we hear from Vladimir, we'll hear from Chief Curator Wilfried Zeisler. As I'm sure you know, he's a graduate of the Sorbonne University and the École du Louvre in Paris. Wilfried has written extensively on French and Russian decorative arts. And at Hillwood, his most recent exhibitions were Fabergé Rediscovered, Balca de Vries War and Pieces, Natural Beauties, Exquisite Works of Minerals and Gems, and of course, The Porcelain Flowers of Vladimir Kanevsky. Please join me in welcoming Wilfried Zeisler.
Thank you so much, Kate. So first of all, I would like to really say how we are thrilled to be tonight with Vladimir Kanevsky for our conversation. And after, I will give you an overview of our exhibition in the mansion at Hillwood. I'm sure he will share with all of us so many details about his extraordinary pieces that you can admire at Hillwood. So this project actually took a lot of time to create and to bring to Hillwood. It's part of our programs of bringing in and working with contemporary artists and designers such as Vladimir, and we had a few precedent exhibitions in the past with such collaborations. But today I would like to give you an overview of the display, and through the mention, for those of you who know Hillwood, you will be familiar with these areas, but for maybe others who are not familiar with Hillwood, this is how the display is made throughout the mansion at Hillwood, so different houses and rooms, sorry. And the concept of the show was actually to have Vladimir wonderful sculptures like porcelain flowers to interact with our own collection here at Hillwood. So as you can see, the main areas by for the exhibition are the entrance hall. When you arrive, you are immediately welcomed by a piece by Vladimir, and then in the dining room and breakfast room, this is where you have the main displays on the left of this slide, and then finally the French drawing room and pavilion are also decorated with some of Vladimir's creations. So the first piece I wanted to show you here is actually this gorgeous lilac, which I think on these photos show you the concept of this exhibition, which was to have Vladimir's creation interact with the collection here assembled by Marjorie Post, our founder, with our wonderful Western European art and Russian art. And here in the entry hall, the lilac, as you can see, interacts with many of our objects. And Marjorie Post, of course, was known for her love for gardens, for porcelain, for flowers. So that makes also perfect sense for us to display these creations here at Hillwood. And in many of the rooms where you can admire Vladimir's works, you can also see some of our pieces that we selected together, that dialogue together, showing how Vladimir's creations are part of a tradition for artists and designers who throughout centuries in different cultures have always tried to represent the nature or to be inspired by nature by creating flowers using different materials. And in the entry hall, actually not far from that wonderful lilac, you have this first example that is showcased, highlighted in the exhibition, which is this pair of one of the pair of trees made in China in the 18th century, most likely in the workshop of the Imperial Workshop of Beijing in China, which is a tree made of gold and whose flowers and leaves are made of different gemstones, including jades and also corals, showing, you know, different material, but same tradition of, you know, reproducing or trying to imitate the nature through different materials here. So that's what you can admire in the entrance of the mansion. And then the main area where we have many of the, you know, flowers displayed is a dining room and the breakfast room. And here you have the selection of hollyhocks by Vladimir that are displayed here on the sideboard in the dining room, which are part of this very theatrical display. And this main display was the subject matter of many discussions and back and forth with, you know, Vladimir to select the flowers, to discuss, you know, their locations and the way how we wanted to set the table. And actually, we decided to reinvent here a modern centerpiece or surtout de table. So when continuing this tradition of having this garden-inspired, flower-inspired table decoration that were so fashionable in the 17th and 18th century, especially for desserts setting. And here we have this selection of gorgeous flowers, including this amazing cherry blossom in the center, and also the strawberries and other here flowers, which are presented in that setting, which is for two, so very formal, and also enhanced with a few of our, you know, porcelain figurines featuring the four seasons, a sort of ode to spring, which works perfectly with Vladimir's flowers. And here I wanted to show you a detail of our setting for two. And for this setting, so Vladimir and I selected this porcelain from our collection, from Marjorie Post's collection of 18th century Sèvres porcelain, this beautiful service made at Sèvres in the 1770s, which was part of a service commissioned by Prince Roland. And you can see his monogram on the center of the table, which is decorated with garlands and birds, and which is set with some of our 19th century Sèvres inspired flatware with porcelain handles and a selection of glassware from our collection for that formal setting for two, separated with this arrangement of porcelain flowers by Vladimir Kanevsky. Our breakfast room is following the same concept, with a centerpiece made by Vladimir, but set in a more traditional way for four here. In the center, you can see this beautiful arrangement of tulips by Vladimir, who and he will tell you more, I'm sure, about this during one of his visits at Hillwood, was inspired by the wonderful tulips that we have in the gardens. And it's set here for four with a selection of 19th century French porcelain from Sèvres, with these blue ribbons and garlands of flowers, set with 19th century French tableware, flatware, silverware, which was made for the Imperial Russian court, and cup and saucers from Russian, also set from the 19th century, made at the Imperial Porcelain Factory. From our collection, but inspired by Sèvres model, and they work very well here together around surrounding this centerpiece by Vladimir Kanevsky. And then the other area where we have, you know, flowers displayed is on the right, the French drawing room and the pavilion, one of the two largest rooms with a dining room in the mansion here at Hillwood. And in those rooms, the idea was again to have, this dialogue between, Vladimir's creations and some of our objects, especially from the porcelain collection. And here on this slide, you can see the beautiful amaryllis set on this 18th century French table with this gorgeous marquetry. And right next to it, one of our potpourri vases here, which is made of Chinese porcelain, but mounted with steel bronze in Paris, which is a typical example of these kind of luxury goods, which were produced in Paris in the 18th century for an elegant clientele, and at the top of which you have this wonderful detail you can admire on the left of the slide, which shows you this little dog and scratching his ear, and in front of beautiful porcelain flowers, the forerunners of Vladimir's creations made at Vincennes. And I'm sure Vladimir will tell you more about that, but these are the kind of, works of art from the 18th century when, porcelain was become a real art that was also a source of inspiration for many of his creations. So here a wonderful example of how the dialogue exists between Vladimir's works and our collection. Another part of the concept behind this exhibition was to also, continue the tradition set by our founder. Marjorie Post, as I said earlier, was a collector of porcelain, loved gardens, loved flowers, and she also stated in her will when she was creating the basis for our future museum that the interior of the rooms should be filled with flower arrangement, fresh flower arrangement. And this is a tradition we continue today, using some of our flowers coming from our cutting garden. And the idea here was to have actually the locations where we usually have flower arrangement be, the location where we will display some of Vladimir's creation. And these locations are in the French drawing room and in the pavilion, the top of the pianos. And on the next slide, you can see how wonderfully the location are here featured with, two beautiful works by Vladimir. So the hibiscus on the left, on the piano in the French drawing room, surrounded by frame by the French firm of Cartier, and framing picture portraits of all the royals and other people that Marjorie Post knew and met during her life. And on the right, the camellias on the top of the piano in the pavilion, which are surrounded by portraits, framed portraits of members of the Russian imperial family, another passion and aspect of Marjorie Post's collection. So in the pavilion, this is also where you can admire some of the smaller scale arrangements by Vladimir Kanevsky, such as Lily of the Valley, the Yesence, or the Hydrangea, as you can see here on these slides, which are set here on these beautiful malachite tops. So they are like this nice connection between the green of this Russian stone and these arrangements. And in this location specifically, we also have established some dialogues between Vladimir's works and our pieces. And again, you can see some of our porcelain flower decorating 18th century and 19th century objects, such as on the left, this Derby, the Derby porcelain factory in England from the 18th century, a figure of Minerva. And if you look at the detail here, not only you can see the taste and the fashion for naturalistic design and flower design in the 18th century in decorative arts. So you see that through the painting on the dress of the goddess here, but also the taste for porcelain flowers, and that you can see on the back of the figurine, as you can see here. And on the right, a 19th century, most likely German, little perfume bottle, very tiny, completely covered with naturalistic porcelain and colorful flowers, showing the continuation of this tradition even in the 19th century. But in the same room, you can also see that this tradition of, getting inspired by nature, trying to compete, I will say, with nature, was also done using different materials. So not only porcelain, but also precious material. And here you have, wonderful piece by Fabergé on the left, and another one by an unknown maker from, the early 20th century, both of them. On the left, the Fabergé piece is a cornflower made of gold enamel, and both put into a rock crystal little vase, looking like, a little vase of water, filled with water. And on the right, here you have the pencils with agate, diamond, and jade for the flower itself, and the stems are made of gold. And of course, these flowers, very precious ones, were particularly successful in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and especially in Russia, where the climate was so rude that it was a way for the members of the elite to keep fresh flowers always in bloom in their interiors, while outside it was so cold. So it's just a way to show how these creations by Vladimir interact with our collection. And finally, the last space in the mansion where you can admire a piece by Vladimir Kanevsky, which also speaks to our collection and the taste of our founder, Marjorie Post, is her bedroom and her suite upstairs in the mansion, which you can see on that plan. And in this specific bedroom, in this room, you have a wonderful portrait of our founder, Marjorie Post, by the painter Chandor. You can see it on the left. And on this room, you can see on this painting, sorry, she's holding an orchid. And among the flowers she loved, you had orchids. And our greenhouse today that you can still visit is still known for its wonderful collection of orchids. And if you know us and you visit us on a regular basis, there is always an orchid in a little vase, a fresh one, on the mantle right underneath the portrait of Marjorie Post in her bedroom. And as a part of our concept, when we were working on this project with Vladimir, it was for him to create his first orchid, which is showcased in the bedroom. And here is actually a detail of this orchid that Vladimir created for us, and how it's presented right next to the portrait of our founder, and which speaks to her taste for, as I said, gardens, flowers, and porcelain, and which made us a perfect, I think, location for a collaboration with Vladimir Kanevsky and for such a display. So that was a short overview of our exhibition. And again, we are thrilled to have Vladimir with us tonight. And I will stop sharing my screen so that we can start our conversation. So Vladimir, welcome. I mean, we are very happy and thrilled to have you with us tonight. And first, I wanted to, start this conversation by, maybe you can share with us. I mentioned very quickly, your first visit at Hillwood. So, but maybe you can tell us more about, how you discovered us and how you got maybe inspired by us first time you came for a visit.
Sure. Hello, everybody. And yes, I visited Hillwood for the first time in my life, like several years ago already. Time flies. And I immediately thought that this is the place where I want to show my flowers, because of partly because of Russian collection. I don't consider myself a Russian artist, but still there is some my native language at least. Plus the quality of interior, quality of the pieces collected by the museum really inspired to make this exhibition. And as to flowers, I have to say that first flower that I saw and I was so impressed that I thought that I would make it for the first time was the collection of tulips. Just in front, as if I remember correctly, it was just in front of the mansion. And they were so large and so powerful and so with such a character and color and everything that I needed as inspiration. And also they were like the scale of almost tableware, which great for porcelain, of course, because there was connection. It was the first impression, and the second were camellias, famous Hillwood camellias, also very large scale and large flowers. And so I started making camellias after that too. But also there was another piece that's inspired not only by Hillwood, but Washington, DC in general. And I have to say in Russia and Ukraine, where I was born, and Russia where I lived, there were the same flowers. So it's not unique for Washington, but the cherry blooms, blossoms, and this celebration of blossoming cherries was very important as a very centerpiece of this exhibition. And it was the first time when I made blossoms, and the scale is also very large for porcelain flowers. And I mean, the room itself is pretty large, so it's and busy, and it a little bit makes them visually smaller, but believe me, they're large, they're big. And of course the specific orchid,
yes,
which is made for the first time. I never I was asked to make orchids like many times, and I never wanted to do it. I thought it would be important to do it for the Hillwood exhibition. So
that's wonderful. I mean, thank you so much for this piece, and it works so well with our painting. And regarding the cherry blossom, of course, I mean, they are quite famous, you know, here in DC, but they are like, you know, universal. And when you think about Russian culture, I mean, Chekhov and, you know, his cherry orchard, I mean, there are a lot of connections, of course. But from your first visit, it seems like definitely that you got inspired by some of our flowers you saw at Hillwood. So it made me just think about, you know, definitely you are inspired by the flowers you admire, you know, outdoor and when you see them. But do you have maybe other source of inspirations when you know, start to create, you know, one of your flowers?
Actually, it's very often happens like it happened in Hillwood. Like, for example, I remember how I first saw the artichokes, the big artichoke, and I was impressed, and I started making them. And peonies, and these are iconic flowers that I wanted to show in Hillwood. If you look at the Fabergé small flowers, they're not similar to my pieces, but they're also flowers. They're also very iconic, mostly iconic for Russian culture, like cornflower, for example. It's very important in Russian culture, and some others. So it's kind of combination of iconic flowers from my repertoire and flowers important for the Hillwood. And my main idea was to create interior of the exhibition as piece of art, not just separate pieces, and to connect to the Hillwood interior. And by the way, it's as Kate mentioned already, I had it was let me see, it was almost 4 years ago already, a very big exhibition in Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia, not Florida, Russia. And they also have these very opulent, very rich, with a lot of gold, beautiful interiors. But it was different because I had for the exhibition 2 rooms in Winter Museum, in Winter Palace of the museum, but in Hermitage they were displayed in closed vitrines and totally separated from the interior itself. Here, it's the first time it was the opportunity to connect to the interior. That's why this rather complicated system of almost like French garden on the main table. I liked the idea of 2, I think it was your idea, of 2 table settings, and it's both COVID distancing.
Yes.
And you know, this old European aristocratic long table and spouses sitting at the big distance. So there is some kind of literature behind this exhibition. So that's.
Thank you. I mean, it's true. I mean, it's really, there are only a few flowers in the exhibition, and actually didn't shows them, but there are only 3 in the case at Hillwood, and all the others are actually, you know, in the setting, as I said, in dialogue with our collection and set on our, you know, different pieces of furniture. So that's really, I think, was a nice way to display them. It works very well with our collection. So I know we have talked about it in the past during our, you know, work and preparation for this exhibition. So, you know, we always, and I have said that several times, you know, during my presentation, like your creation being part of a tradition, you know, of, you know, this art and design of, you know, trying to imitate nature, but you are really creating works of art and real sculptures because of your, you know, training also as an architect. And maybe you could tell us a bit more about, you know, your vision of flowers and how you try to, you know, create them as a sculpture in your process.
Yes. Well, the whole art of mine, if I may say so, stems from, of course, from the old European tradition, mostly 18th century, porcelain flowers, metal stems and leaves. But this tradition changed very much. What I think I'm not a botanical artist. I'm a sculptor who tries to create portraits of flowers. It's totally different thing. It's more like still life, or sometimes the scale is large enough to call them almost architectural objects. On the other hand, I love botany, and I love flowers and plants themselves. I see the story in them. It's their evolution, it's their beauty, it's their traditional perception of by the human culture. symbolic meaning. And so I mix everything in this. And when I need something to make something for the interior, for example, the cherry blossoms, I make architectural objects. Sometimes I make a miniature piece with different idea. So it's actually it's sculpture on topic of flowers. And I have to say that that topic is probably the most prevalent in the history of art and architecture, because we can find images of flowers from ancient Egypt and earlier through ancient Rome and up to nowadays, Van Gogh flowers, Dutch still life, Japanese decoration on Japanese weapons, and I can go on and on and on with this, and even in poetry. So I would even say that flowers are most prevalent and people are the second most prevalent. So
I mean, it's absolutely true, because when I look at some of your, arrangements and compositions, I mean, for example, the tulips, they are like, of course, came, and as you said, I think there is always a story behind each of the flowers you create, and it might be, a history related to art history, but a personal history, of course, I'm sure, when you saw it for the first time and when you got the idea. But the tulip arrangement, they are really, they always made me think of 17th century lifestyle, paintings, and where they were like with a lot of symbols, and they make, directly connected to these models for sure. Speaking of, this, we talk about, your source of inspirations, but and I have started to see some questions appearing, in the chat, but I was planning to go there definitely. So you are sitting in your studio, right? And so maybe you can share a bit, not too much, because Porcelain has always been, a secret, and you cannot share all the secrets, but at least, give us a bit more information or details about the process, how you creates these wonderful pieces of architecture.
Yeah, yes, it's a very good. It's well said. Porcelain is, but I decided to do a shortcut here. Porcelain is always has this mystique, this mystery. I cannot share the recipe, although the recipe is well known, but still, yeah. I cannot share it. I use porcelain technique. Most of the techniques are mine. I never studied porcelain, and so it was through all the mistakes and tries and all that I developed certain techniques, and I keep doing them. And I use the materials that are available. And we are buying materials all over the world, even from Australia, definitely from Europe, and of course, the United States. But I use those materials not in classical way, in the way they intended, but differently. And it gives me some possibilities. And actually, I like when the experts in porcelain say, "How did you do it?"
So how, Vladimir?
It's a mystery. Although it's some of them are rather simple, but also, for example, the flowers that you showed from Europe, porcelain, the flower itself were produced by some manufacturers Metal part was made by different manufacturers, and it was different people making the parts, and then it was combined together. I have to do it all by myself, and it gives me tremendous joy because I switch from welding to firing of porcelain, from sculpting to working hammering of the copper, to painting, to all these techniques. And when they come together, the piece is born. And another thing that gives me joy, that my first love, architecture, this thing is very close to architecture in many ways. It has this junction of art and engineering, but also all the different materials. When you see a building, there are all different materials: glass, brick, concrete, wood, that come together to create architectural piece. And here it's similar. And I really like it, this natural progression, no unnecessary purity in the materials. I mix everything and it's very direct, and I build it.
So it's, stem and leaves are made of metal, right?
Yes.
And then the flower itself is porcelain, and they are all...
It's porcelain, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not always so, because I started with pieces that were only porcelain, like nothing, without metal. And my first Lily of the Valleys were, everything was porcelain, leaves, even stems, everything. They were fragile as, I don't know.
I'm sure.
More fragile than anything. So I cannot even compare it. And every time I tried to ship them to a collector received small pieces. But even now, I make, from time to time, I make different arrangements, for example, porcelain leaves and everything. But it crystallized like this: porcelain flowers, metal stems, painted stems and leaves, hammered and painted, and usually terracotta pots, or sometimes porcelain, or sometimes antique containers that I like. Sometimes I use them, or use containers by that collectors give me for the arrangement. If I like the base that they give me, I can do it there. So it's quite direct.
And
direct. Yes.
What I love about your flowers, when you look closely to them, and I really encourage everyone who will visit our exhibition to do the same, but behind the stanchions, don't get too close, but as close as you can, to look at the wonderful details, of course. And what I love, when you start looking at Vladimir's flowers, you start to see how perfect they are because they are imperfect. And so, the leaves are attacked by insects. There are like some little holes and all of that. So can you maybe develop a bit on that aspect of your creation, which I think made them fascinating?
Actually, in perfection, is we discussed it some time ago, that porcelain is in at least European, Chinese also, porcelain, imperfection is very important. It makes it warm. If you go to Metropolitan Museum and look at, for example, Meissen, big Meissen figures, not small figurines, but figures of animals. Are we on?
Something yeah, we are here. We are nowhere.
Oh, okay. They from 18th century, they have cracks, they warped, and it's so heartwarming, because like end of 19th century, most of the porcelain became ideal, no mistakes, nothing, and it's cold. it's not really great porcelain mostly happened on 18th century because of those imperfections. And I try to cultivate it. Well, it happens by itself because when you put a big porcelain piece, and sometimes I make tureens that are larger scale and tableware, it happens without my intention even. Pieces crack a little bit, warp, and it's part of my work. But also I kind of show the imperfections. Insect bites, yellow discolorations on the leaves and everything. This is more like a tongue-in-cheek idea. I'm not seriously trying to copy nature. It's a kind of sign that that it's botany and it's imperfect.
And we had just like Erin sharing with us, our moderator, a photo showing one of the details I was thinking about your flowers. I see the yes, here we go.
Yes,
yes,
yeah.
Exactly what we were talking about. So I think we have time for more questions, but I think I just wanted to ask you, Vladimir, again. I mean, as I said, you are in your workshop, and behind you I can see some porcelain flowers. And so you know, in our display, each arrangement is like one flower. And as I can see from, you know, behind you, it's, you know, a mix of different flowers. So usually, what do you prefer to do? What is your inspiration? Do you prefer to focus on one flower, or is it depending on, you know, the commission you receive or anything? Or how do you, you know, decide if you will mix them together or if you will do only one flower for your arrangements?
I almost always prefer one flower. It gives me more, it's more like sculpture, and it's it's probably less traditional, but more like sculpture. But in some cases, I make this, I call them salads. So
fresh flower
sometimes
salad.
people just ask me, and I feel some connection to this person, and so I do it. This piece, for example, is made for the Chinese collector who has some of my flowers, and I felt that I would do it. And by the way, this is the container itself. It's hers. She bought it. And it's very interesting and very typical. It's Chinese porcelain container in French bronze kind of frame. They did it. That they imported Chinese porcelain and framed it to make it Baroque, which is also similar to using porcelain flower and kind of frame made of metal. You can look at my pieces also like this. So I like the base, and that's why I'm working on it now. And also I made a big arrangement like this for Hermitage for the exhibition, because we it's a tradition in Hermitage to give a piece to the museum, and they promised to show it often. And it was the idea was like this: you can disassemble it, and Hermitage has, as Hillwood, Hermitage has great Russian tableware. And they show it all over the world, the tableware. And they needed centerpieces. So the idea was they could collect some flowers from this big composition, put them in the tureen and show them. So it was play like this. And by the way, Hillwood tableware is on par with Hermitage.
I know we have some services
Congratulations.
that half is his and half is there, so here and there.
I have to say that when I, for the first time, I came, when we had talk about the future show, I studied the porcelain that you have, and it's really rich.
It's a wonderful
I had
collection.
such a great time studying it. So
thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, before we give the floor to a few questions from the audience, maybe a last question from me for our conversation and to wrap up our discussion around the exhibition. I mean, my question will be like the traditional one. So among the, pieces that you created for our special exhibition at Hillwood, which one will be your favorite? I know.
you want my usual joke on it? Like, always, the interviews, I'm always asked, which are your favorite flowers of yours? And they always say, they're all my children, and I hate them all. So, yeah, but seriously, in Hillwood, I would say that I started with the two most important pieces, tulips, definitely, because I made them differently than I made my tulips before. They're painted differently, sculpted differently. Most definitely the blooms, the cherry blossoms, and the rest. Well, some of them are. Each of them is interesting for me because of some reasons. So it's hard to separate. But I also I like hibiscus. It's my very first hibiscus, and well, and I really dislike all the rest.
Very good. So we will end it here. Thank you so much, Vladimir. It was really wonderful. And Erin, I'm sure we have already a lot of questions, so I will let you, take the floor. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you both so much. And we do indeed have lots of great questions coming in from our audience. There is still more time to submit them, so please don't be shy. Vladimir, you talked a little bit about kind of the secrets that go into fabrication. And we had a couple of questions about that general process, but Cheryl asked a really interesting question, I think, that I've not heard you answer before, and that is whether each individual petal and blossom and leaf are sculpted individually or if they are ever molded.
Oh, it's it depends. Different flowers are made in different techniques, and when I prepare making a new flower, I usually have to find a different technique, and usually it's the whole spectrum from a mold to a tool, to my just fingers. And there was a gray zone between mold and tool, like moldish tool or toolish mold, something in between. Because I sometimes I make special tools for special flower. It's a complicated process, but that's what I really like. That's close to engineering. So all three: tools, molds, and hands.
Excellent. We've also gotten a couple of questions about how the flowers are transported and shipped, and Cheryl is channeling several of the questions I already have in the Q&A here. And I love Chris, I think, was the first person to ask straight to the meat of what it would be like for us to live with your flowers. How do you dust them? How do we need to keep them clean?
Yeah, this is interesting that they look very fragile, but they're not very fragile. They are fragile, but porcelain is a strong material. And sometimes they're very fragile, sometimes less. How I clean them? I take the flower, put it in a shower, and shower it. They're exactly like people. If you shower them, they're clean. So.
I love that. I love that. Our orchid curator has said a very similar thing about some of the orchids.
Yeah.
So I love that the care for porcelain is exactly the same.
Yeah, easily done. So.
Wilfried, this next question I think is for you, though perhaps it was a combination. April asked how it was decided to put which flowers into which space or which room.
Well, that was a process of, discussion with Vladimir. So, Vladimir came to visit us twice before we, started to work on the project. And then we together decided where the things will go. And then also for final placement, a lot was also for some of the flowers decided, on the spot because of, some of the location which were looking really good with the flowers and we didn't maybe have thought about earlier on. But it was really, I think, right, Vladimir, collaboration and the discussion about where. And immediately, I think you said the lilac will be for the entrance when you will arrive. And then for the others, it was, more or less a discussion and a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
Excellent. Vladimir, we've gotten a lot of questions, and I know that this is going to be a hard one to answer, but a lot of questions about how long it takes for you to create. One, Irene asked about, the entire arrangement of cherry blossoms, for example, or Nancy asked about, a single tulip stem like the ones that we see right behind you.
I'm often asked this question, of course, and it's impossible to answer usually because I make many flowers, and I have in my studio, I have the whole like a library of like hundreds of different flowers, and I have help in my studio. I have assistants who help me doing this. And when I start making the piece, I select them mostly. Sometimes I make flowers for the specific piece, but usually it's all together. Also, I have my kilns where I fire the flowers. They're rather big. So I have to make a lot of flowers to put them in the kiln and fire them all together. Same with painting, because each flower, if it's painted, if it's like tulip, it can be 10 firings each, like the whole day, and then whole day cooling. So it's very difficult to separate different projects and say, but with cherry blossoms, it's more easy. It's like pretty much all summer. in my other studio in upstate, and producing that many flowers, even though my assistants helped me, still it's a lot of work. So it was long, but tulips are even worse. The metal part is easier, but the flowers, it's really horribly difficult. So.
I would imagine the lilac too, just since there are so many individual pieces. And I mentioned that because Ellen chimed in the chat that they are the most amazing vision upon entering, and they are just perfect in that entry hall spot. And I agree, it does seem like you walk into the entry hall and you should be able to smell the lilacs because they are so, so lovely. And unlike real lilacs, they don't fade in a day or two.
3 days. It's a flower of my childhood. I have special connection with the flowers. And by the way, to answer the question how long lilac took, for example, it took me more than 5 years to find a way how to do them. And recently, one of my first collectors, Howard Slotkin, who knows me from the moment I started doing this, presented my wife's back my very first lilac. It was the size of probably lemon, like small lemon, like this, totally different. And it developed eventually into this. And when you know how to make it, it's not that easy because it's the whole thing. It's not that difficult because the whole thing is well thought of, and it's like technical work, and then you make the composition. This is art. So that's.
We've got a couple of questions along the same theme. And Tracy asked if there's a variety of flower that you were truly confounded by and that you simply could not create. And April asked if there was a flower you refused to create, which may be two halves of the same coin, but I'll let you pick which half you want to respond to.
Both. It's two completely separate questions. One question, which flower I don't want to do, and another question, which flower I can't do. And the first question, for example, I never wanted to do orchid because I thought that it's exotic, rather exotic flower, and it's not a good idea to make it in exotic material or something like that. Or I usually try to do iconic flowers that are in our culture. But so what was needed for orchid is the idea that it will be connected to the portrait of Marjorie Post. And some flowers don't yield themselves to porcelain, to making it in porcelain. Sometimes it's very difficult. Like, for example, this little anecdote about Fabergé, who made dandelion, and he wanted to make it with this fluffy, I don't know how they call it in English, this fluffy thing. And I imagine that he was thinking how to make it. And eventually he took a cotton ball and made the flower. So some things are very difficult to make in porcelain, and it's just not needed. Sometimes, for example, I refused to make clematis because I didn't know how to make it in a sense that how to make it, it's very transparent light and fragile flower. difficult to make in porcelain. And then I had this idea, and it became the one of the most popular flower for me. So.
Judy asked if you keep fresh flowers in your studio for inspiration, or whether you're an avid gardener, or whether you just get your inspiration from visiting places like Hillwood. Or all three.
all three. All three. No, I don't keep especially keep flowers in my studio, and unfortunately I'm not a gardener. I would love to be a gardener, but I so short of time always. I'm so busy always that unfortunately I cannot do it. But I admire real flowers, and when I travel, I always go to botanical gardens everywhere. It's my favorite pastime. And I photograph flowers, and I document them, I draw them. And my favorite, of course, garden, of course, here in New York Botanical Garden in Bronx. It's not far from where I live, and I love it. And I usually disassemble, sometimes, not usually, sometimes I disassemble the real flower. And I have to say, each time I do it, I really feel so uncomfortable, as if I'm killing something alive. So I try to do it without cutting and disassembling, but sometimes I do, and I scan them in computer, or I photograph them, I draw them, and go from there.
I love that. I love that. Rick asked if you've ever created hyacinths. This spring in particular, it seemed like the ones in Hillwood's Motor Court were just absolutely vibrant and lovely. And there's always this magical day where when I'm walking up from my parking spot, that I can tell the hyacinths bloomed today. This amazing scent.
It's my favorite flower. I made probably more hyacinths than all other flowers combined. I can, if I may, I'll do this. They're not finished, but here you are.
Those are incredible.
So these are perfect for the porcelain, and I started making them. My first hyacinths were all porcelain, leaves, stems, and flowers, and it's a perfect flower for porcelain because of colors, shapes. It took me quite a lot of time to come to this final variant of them, but I always make them. By the way, there are hyacinths in Hillwood. So.
Yes, they are in the pavilion. You can admire them on one of them on the Malachite table. Yes.
You mentioned something just a moment ago about stems in particular, and that links to Chris's question about how the stems you mentioned are mostly metal and copper. Are the flowers bendable? Do they get posed or repositioned in the final arrangements?
Well, the copper parts, usually, not always, but usually bendable, and you can, after shipping, you have to tune up them a little bit. And sometimes we even fly to the spot. For example, right now, my wife is in, she's coming. She installed 2 of my pieces in the room of our collector. Not 2, 3 pieces. So
that kind of dovetails a little bit with Margaret's question, which was to ask a little bit more about how the flowers are shipped, whether they are sent whole as the arrangement, or whether there are individual pieces that get reassembled.
No, when I started, it was huge, very difficult question because every arrangement that I shipped was broken. I bought airline tickets and went to Europe, mostly to Europe, to repair. Now I found an easy way to ship. It disassembles and then packed really simply in most cases, and it arrives perfect. And I usually make this IKEA type explanation how to assemble it, and people just assemble it. The pieces sometimes when it's very like the case now, it's more difficult to assemble, so, and it's big pieces, so we fly and help, or we do it through the video.
We've gotten a couple of questions, not only about how those of us who aspire to become collectors of yours can shower with our arrangements, but we did get a question about whether you ever sell single stems, a single rose or dahlia or tulip or hyacinth, or whether you always create them in these lovely arrangements.
No, very often we make just a branch of flower, or just a little pot with one stem and a flower. A lot. I actually like this when it's iconic flower. It should be single in single pot, and it's very decorative, and I do it very often.
I love that. Megan asked, when you work with a collector, are you invited to create something based on their own interiors or the designs in their homes or their gardens? How does that collaboration work?
Sometimes I collaborate with the collector, but there is difficulty in it because I know about these sculptures, surprise more than a collector. And sometimes it's very difficult because people don't know exactly what they want. So usually I make a couple of sketches. The collector sends me the photographs, for example, of the place where it will be exhibited. And I come up with some ideas. I usually even Photoshop a piece from some older flowers, and or make a drawing. And we discuss different variants. For example, will it be a hyacinth or hollyhock, for example? And then I start making, and I usually don't like when I'm being told could you make this little leaf, not here, but here? And could you make this flower like a little bit more yellow like my sofa? I really don't like it. But otherwise, I'm thrilled, and I respect people who are buying my pieces very much. So my unyielding comes from respect more than from
I absolutely get
from
that.
being stubborn.
Well, and the beauty of the work is the magic that you work, not the exact coordination with the setting.
Also, photography doesn't give justice to these pieces. You have to look at them. They're very 3D, and you have to see the scale. Photography doesn't work as it is. So.
Well, and that's a lovely transition. Ellen asked if there are any books about your work, or whether there's one that might be in the works one day.
Yes, I started making a book like a few times already. So we photographed the pieces in different interiors. But then every time something come up, for example, we started making, we were very close to making a book. And Hermitage happened. Before that, we started, and Meissen happened. So every time I'm so busy that it's difficult. The only book that, like serious book, was the catalog by Hermitage with all the pieces and very long and detailed text for this. But it's in Russian. And it's impossible to buy. They were sold out in the first week, I think, of the exhibition in Hermitage. But
Well, that's a pretty tremendous compliment.
yeah, the was quite a lot was published, but people just immediately. Well, I hope I'll do the book soon.
Well, we will certainly keep our eyes peeled. Wilfried, I think this may be more of a question for you, and that is whether there were any discussions about putting some of Vladimir's pieces inside some of our porcelain collection.
Yes, we discussed it. It was part of the conversation, but at one point we decided it will be a bit complicated because of, knowing exactly what size and how many we would have. I mean, it sounds maybe we had a lot, but we don't have so many, and also question of conservation of some of these pieces. So at one point we decided to use actually, so together we came on an agreement about, let's, we were still thinking of maybe for smaller ones, but at the end we went in another direction.
Well, and I think that's part of the fun of the story. I think just as the individual pieces need to get assembled and all of those lilac blooms become this something larger. I always love when we can share a little bit of the story about, yeah, that would have been really great, and there are so many reasons that we went this way instead, because it is absolutely stunning, and I think it's perfect as it is. So I'm glad that this is where we ended. And I will use Candy's question as a final one to pose, and that is whether any of the arrangements are coming to live with us at Hillwood permanently. Oh, I promised you earlier that we wouldn't stump you with anything.
Unfortunately, no. What happened? They almost all are sold already. I can't believe it, but it's just gone. And some of the pieces are sold at people who want to buy more, and it's gone already. So, but I will visit Hillwood.
Excellent. Well, and I'm so glad that your collectors were willing to share and have them at Hillwood. This show has just been an absolute delight and a moment of joy and beauty at a time where I'll just speak for myself and say I've really needed that and I've really appreciated it. Mm-hmm. So,
and if I may, I'm sorry I interrupted. No. If I may, I want to say thank you, Hillwood, for this opportunity, to show my work in such an excellent setting, and it was fun.
Thank you, Vladimir, for bringing your art to Hillwood. So
So thank you for your set. Thank you.
Well, and I will continue this chain of thank yous by thanking all of you who have tuned in with us this evening and for your excellent questions. This has been an absolutely wonderful way to spend a Wednesday evening, and I hope that the rest of you enjoy the next couple of hours to come before it's time to turn in, and that those of you who are in the DC area will please find the time to come and see the exhibition in person, as well as those extraordinary gardens right now.
Absolutely.
Thank you all very much.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.